when it comes to blockbuster movies, 2020 has obviously sucked. I mean, we were expecting Black Widow, and now we're not going to get that. It's already November. We're not going to get that till 2021.
No, we're not.
But to help you fill that void, we have come up with our favorite 10 Marvel movies.
Yes.
So stick around, and you might be surprised as to what our number ones will be.
Welcome back to The Real Screeners. I'm Beto.
And I'm Lenny.
And we are here to count down our favorite top 10 MCU films out of a total of 23 MCU movies that, of course, started with Iron Man back in 2008.
It's been 12 years, man.
Yes. And, of course, as we always ask, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Please subscribe, like, and share if you like our content.
Like we said, this is our list of our favorite MCU movies. This is not based on Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic. It's not any list you've ever seen. It's not based on box office scores. This is what we found near and dear to our hearts, right?
In making my list, I was thinking not along the lines of what the best quality film necessarily was, but just the MCU movies that I enjoyed the most, that I had the most fun watching. Of course, I feel like you're more of a Marvel fan than I am, so
absolutely.
I still am not entirely familiar with every single little, aspect of the plot of these films. I don't feel like I have a good grasp on everything, but
you don't need to.
But I don't need to, and I love the movies and I enjoy them, and so I went with just my gut and what I love.
And I will respect your list, but we all know my list is gonna be better.
Well, let's see about that, right?
Let's go with your number 10.
My number 10, drum roll, is Spider-Man Homecoming.
Sorry. Keep going. Go. You'll know why I'm laughing. Just
yes. So my number 10 is Spider-Man Homecoming, and I had a little bit of a hard time deciding to take off another movie and put this one on my top 10, but ultimately I'm a Spider-Man fan, and I really loved Tom Holland in this movie and the fresh take that he brings to the Spider-Man character. I really dig his childhood sensibilities in this movie. It really felt like I was watching Spider-Man truly behave as a kid in high school and really navigating through his high school, going through the motions of being a high school kid.
It seemed very realistic.
While at the same time maturing into the Spider-Man persona or character. And I really love Michael Keaton in this movie as Vulture. I've loved Michael Keaton since he played Batman, but I think that he brings a great villain. And I dug some of the action sequences in this movie as well. Particularly, there's a Washington Monument scene that I really that lives vividly in my mind. And you have Marissa Tomei playing the Ant, and I don't know. I love the cast, right? And I enjoyed this movie, and I don't know that Tom Holland is my favorite Spider-Man. That's a whole different conversation. I don't know if I love this Spider-Man movie more than any other Spider-Man movie, but out of the MCU films, I had to put this one in there.
Okay, of course, yeah, you have to get Spider-Man in there, which is why. It's also my number 10.
No way, really?
That's why I was laughing. Really? I was like, I knew we were going to have some overlap, but my goodness, starting off at number 10. Okay.
Wow, okay.
All right, so Peter Parker is one of the more complex and relatable characters in comic books, and Tom Holland is the best Peter Parker ever. I thought he did a great job in, portraying this or continuing this Peter Parker coming of age story, while also kind of showing how Spider-Man wasn't perfect in this movie. He was still trying to get into the swing of things, so to speak.
Right.
Pun intended.
And the transition is very well done, because you can see how he's struggling with his goofiness and his dorkiness as a kid.
He's struggling
to enter into that role, And it's really cool the way that Tony Stark or Robert Downey Jr. comes into play in that movie as a mentor.
Well, he's good in any movie, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed Homecoming.
Let's move on.
Brilliant. All right.
So, you're number 9.
I have a suspicion, sir, that this will be higher on your list, but my number 9 is Infinity War.
Okay.
Avengers Infinity War. So my feelings about Infinity War is that it is my second favorite Avengers film. It is, I feel, a movie that is slightly overlong at 160 minutes. And
No Marvel movie is too long, Beto.
I know. I love how, the movie centers around the Thanos character, played very well by Josh Brolin. And I love the existential themes that come about because of Thanos, right? And his whole predicament on what really constitutes living, right? The way that he thinks about life.
It's a different type of logic.
It's a different type of logic. And I love that the movie really has this sense of dread the entire time. And of course, it's the movie that ends on a negative, sad note. And it's different for that reason. I did feel that there were many plots going on at the same time and many subplots. And for me, it was a little bit difficult to follow all of them. And it did feel like a lot of the scenes were either taking place like in a room almost. There were a lot of conversations, a lot of scenes that involved like character to character conversations in that movie, but then it switched nicely to some action sequences.
Dang, man, did you watch this like last night or something? This is pretty fresh, retelling of the movie.
I remember I've seen that movie several times. Ultimately, I like the complexity of Thanos and the journey that these characters kind of embark on.
So my number 9 is a movie that I know is one of your favorites and likely will be higher in your list.
Right.
And it's a movie that broke from the tone of its, I guess, prior to not iterations, but
thank God.
But the prior to,
thank goodness,
its predecessors, right?
Of course.
And so we're talking about Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot higher on my list.
Did you look at my list?
No, I didn't.
Okay, you just knew, right?
Come on, the movie that broke the tone. There's no movie that broke.
We talked about it before.
That's the reason I love Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, and so thank God for director Taika Waititi for saving this franchise, because the first 2 Thors were completely forgettable. They were boring. I mean, everyone says Thor 2 was the worst, but man, that first Thor, I was like thumbed down. And so
the second one even worse.
They were both horrible. But you can tell the franchise in a way waved the white flag, and Waititi came to the rescue and he turned Thor into a comedy, and this was hilarious. From start to finish, it was refreshingly funny. I thought Jeff Goldblum was great as the Grandmaster, and that's without going into too much detail, this was just a funny movie all around. And I didn't think that Chris Hemsworth could pull off a comedic superhero, but he sure did. So.
I love the fact that Waititi took this project and almost it almost feels borderline spoof to me, and I love that about the movie. I love the fact that the humor is on point and it often kind of goes overboard, and I really love the way that they integrate songs and music into this movie, and the score, especially at the end in that final showdown with Hela. I love Cate Blanchett in that role. Yes. I love it. It's like a rock and roll finale, man. I love the finale in this movie, and I love the cameos. I love Sam Neill, playing Odin. I love Matt Damon, Jeff Goldblum, you mentioned. Yeah. I had so much fun watching that movie.
A breath of fresh air for that franchise. Okay.
Anyway.
So, all right. Well, we're going to ping pong back to your number 8.
Okay.
I wonder if we have the same one. I have a feeling.
No.
No?
Oh, no.
You never know, man.
This movie is going to be much higher on your list.
Okay, all right.
I think it will be. And my number 8 is Captain America Civil War.
Get it. Okay.
Yeah. I know it's going to be higher on your list. I know you love it.
Number 8?
Every MCU fan is like, "Oh, Civil War is the best
for good reason."
You know what? Let me just get down to it, man.
Get down.
I think that Civil War is easily one of the better action films in the series, and it actually functions as its own action movie. Like, it's a great action film, and what I'm talking about is the action choreography is stellar in this movie.
Well, it's a Russo movie.
Great, yeah. Like, it's so visceral and so immersive, the action in this movie, and it's different from all the other films because, of course, it's Civil War. It's the good guys fighting the good guys, turning on each other, and so it's a great movie because it delves into that moral dilemma, the politics behind it, what these guys believe in, and how they hold true to what they believe in. But at the end of the day, what brought this movie down for me was I felt like a lot of time was wasted in these guys just going through the motions. And
Wasted.
Yes, it was kind of overlong. And yes, I understand that you feel stubborn about your beliefs and you have some pettiness and all this stuff. And I just thought, come on, get over the melodrama. Move on. Move on,
okay.
Tony Stark. Move on, Steve Rogers. Get over it.
You want Tony Stark to get over the fact that this dude murdered his parents? That Winter Soldier murdered his mother, who he loved so much, and his father, who he wished he had a stronger relationship with, and can never go back to correct that in his life?
Well, I mean, but that's not the only factor, though. I mean, I get it. Like it's hardcore. I mean, there are some good themes in there, but
it's not petty.
When it comes to that, it's not. But there's this whole other part of their disagreement. Their disagreement about their political views.
That's. Ooh, well, you can kind of liken it to people who liked and disliked Trump.
I want more government control. No, I don't. I mean, come on.
Well, but think about like American society with Trump, right? Some people were all for Trump, and some people were totally against Trump, and it got kind of crazy, right? It got hairy for sure.
Don't get me wrong. It is on my top 10. It's my number 8.
Thankfully.
Number 8.
I'd have to unfriend you if it wasn't.
The airport action scene is great. Ant-Man comes to mind in a great comedic turn and performance. And it's great to see Spider-Man for the first time there. So, I mean, definitely a good watch. I liked 7 movies more.
Okay.
Or no, wait.
Yeah, 7 movies more. Yeah. To my number 8, it's the movie that basically started it all, directed by Jon Favreau, right, 2008, and it resurrected Robert Downey Jr.'s career and made Iron Man a bona fide badass. When I heard that the MCU was coming out with an Iron Man movie, I was like, Iron Man of all characters? And then they were like, Robert Downey Jr. I was like, well, isn't he like on the downswing, and has he done anything lately? And he's all up on drugs, and hey. But they struck gold when they cast him for this role, because looking back, I don't know who could have played Tony Stark any better than Robert Downey Jr.
Hands down, man. Hands down.
And it got me super excited for the MCU, and I was like, wow, this is really going to go somewhere.
I mean, he definitely brings a distinct persona to that role, and I love the irreverence, the comedy. I love his self-deprecating humor as Tony Stark. I love that character.
I kind of think that Robert Downey Jr. is
favorite MCU character.
Yeah,
and performance.
I think he does so well with it because it's kind of probably like he is to a degree in real life, I would think. Unfortunately, nothing's perfect, right? This movie starred a villain, Ironmonger, which was played by Jeff Bridges, and he was the first of a slew of forgettable, flat, one-dimensional villains in the MCU. So.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of these villains are very flat, and they're like, ho, I'm going to rule the world, or ho, I just want to do this because power consumes me, blah, blah, blah.
I actually enjoyed Jeff Bridges in that role.
Well, I'm not saying the acting wasn't bad. I mean, the character.
Right, you mean the character. I haven't seen Iron Man in a while, but I do remember one of the things I loved about Iron Man was that the issues in the movie were grounded like in real life, like the whole weapons armament, the increase in armaments and stuff, and how that poses a threat to the world. And I really dug how it felt like it was grounded in reality. And I really dug that this hero, Tony Stark, is kind of like a nerd, and well, that's exactly what he is.
Right, and I like that he was a very redeemable character,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they continue that throughout the whole franchise.
And it was the first, and I don't know, like
it was cool.
I loved Iron Man. All right, so on to my number 7. I have Captain America, the Winter Soldier. And of course, you have that higher up on your list because you like them serious topic movies.
Dude, not even in your top.
I enjoy the funny ones more. I'm sorry.
What's going to be in your top 5?
The Winter Soldier, exactly. What indeed will be my top 5? I'm sorry. The Winter Soldier is a great movie. I actually wrote down that I love how it feels almost noirish, like a noir, in its exploration of paranoia in that time period and espionage, and it has that type of like James Bond feel or Jason Bourne feel to it in a way, with the explanation of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Bucky being all Manchurian candidate with the way that they control his mind. There's great camaraderie between the Black Widow character, the Falcon character, of course, Steve Rogers, and once again, just another MCU film that has very memorable action sequences and that is jam-packed with action, especially towards the latter half of the film.
Obviously, we know that Winter Soldier is going to be on my list.
Top 5?
It'll be somewhere.
Top 2.
So all I'll add to that is the fact that it was the Russo brothers, the directors, the Russo brothers' first foray into the MCU, and they scored a winner. And the only thing that I'll elaborate on that you've already said is that I thought this was the best action in the MCU to this point, and this was the perfect blend of action and characterization. So
my number 6, you already mentioned on your list. It is Iron Man. So
deservedly so.
Deservedly so. We said a lot of good things about it.
Well, what did you think of Gwyneth Paltrow's portrayal of Pepper Potts?
Okay, so as Pepper Potts, I like how she played the character in a very reserved and controlled way. I like Gwyneth Paltrow, and I thought that she was a very good character foil in a way to Tony Stark.
Absolutely what I was thinking, huh?
I really like that character is a kind of like a no-nonsense character to Tony Stark. Like, she doesn't give in
exactly
as the traditional, gender role female would in a relationship like that.
Kind of role,
but she stands her ground and she actually like makes him better and teaches him, and they really, I really dug that about the movie.
It was good stuff.
So that's good. Yeah.
Okay, so my number 6, I'm sure will be in your top 5, because if you haven't mentioned it by now, it's got to be somewhere, right? We're talking about T'Challa and Wakanda Forever, Black Panther. This movie was directed by Ryan Coogler. It introduced us to a new culture, right, in Wakanda, and basically a new world, which is kind of like a techno-utopia, which I thought was really neat. And I like the fact that it was very separated from the rest of the MCU. And
it had its own distinct personality.
It really did.
There's no, yes, there are other movies in the MCU that have a distinct personality, but this one really delved into African customs, African culture, really celebrated the African race. And there's so much of that embedded throughout the movie. As far as the colors in this movie,
yeah, the costuming.
They're so vibrant, and the costuming and the cinematography really stands out.
Right, the special effects, everything.
Chadwick Boseman is so good in that role.
He was, and we'll never forget his performance.
I just thought that he was really regal in it, and so almost came off as like a gentleman. Like, I don't think that there's a more gentlemanly MCU character in my mind than T'Challa.
Right. I
don't know.
I mean, he is
kingly.
Right. He's the king. He's, like you said, regal was the perfect word.
Yeah.
And he did a great performance with it. And unfortunately, obviously, Boseman was, he passed away recently at 42.
So sad.
Taken from us much too soon.
Yeah.
I was very heartbroken when I heard that, by the way.
It was a shame, man.
Going back to the movie, though, you did mention the acting here. I do want to mention that I thought the A-list supporting cast was phenomenal here. And Michael B. Jordan was a complex and unlikable villain. A
great anti-hero in my mind, because you really understood his plight, I felt. I don't think he was all villainous in a way.
Well, I mean, those are the best kind of villains, right? The ones that you can understand why they're doing what they're doing, and that maybe in their eyes they think that they're doing something good, or there's some line of justice in there. I mean, I don't know if he's an anti-hero, but he is definitely a complex.
Could be argued.
Could be. But bottom line, great performances all the way through. Black Panther, my number 6.
Okay, so you may not have this on your list at all.
Captain Marvel. I'm just kidding.
But it's not Captain Marvel. But I love this movie because, once again, it had its own distinct feel. And what I loved about this movie, and let's see if you can guess which one it is that it is the most mystical and magical of all of the MCU movies, because it delved into martial arts.
I got it.
The metaphysical realms. It received some backlash because it was criticized for not hiring Asian actors and whatnot, but we're not going to go there.
A whitewashing, yeah.
I really liked Tilda Swinton as the ancient one, and I really liked Benedict Cumberbatch as
Dr. Corky.
Doctor.
Well, that's a sequel. That's going to be the sequel, Dr. Corky.
That's going to be the sequel. Yeah, Doctor Strange. I loved that movie, man. I loved how trippy it was. I loved how it was very mind-bending. Some of the best special effects in any MCU movie. It was heavy on special effects.
It sure was. Well, it had to be, actually.
It had to
obviously, because it's magical, right?
Because it's very magical. And I love the mentor-mentee, feel to it, and how he slowly, becomes Doctor Strange and learns the ropes of becoming Doctor Strange.
Well, Kevin Feige and Disney, they do such a good job of casting these actors for these roles. And Cumberbatch, when they named him, I was like, perfect.
Yeah.
And he didn't disappoint, right?
Yes. He brings that kind of intellect that's needed for the role. And at the same time, he steps up to the superhero plate.
Mm-hmm. And he can be funny.
And he can be funny as well.
Surprisingly, which he's not known for.
I loved it. I was super into it when I watched it in the theater. I was invested in the trippiness of it. I loved it.
Okay. All right. Well, you were right. That's not in my top 10.
It's not on your top 10, is it?
So my number 5 is another Russo hit. It is Captain America Winter Soldier, deservedly so in the top 10. We already talked enough about it.
So that's your number 5.
That's my number 5.
And it was my number 7. Not too far off.
Not too far off, yeah. But again, the very cloak and dagger, the espionage feel really did it for me. Very involved characterization. I'll leave it at that, guys. So let's go ahead and springboard over your number.
Some good intrigue in there for sure. So, so my number 4 now.
Number 4. All right, we're getting closer, guys.
So my number 4 is the highest grossing film of all time. It is the culmination of everything in the MCU. Okay, so obviously it is Avengers Endgame. I think it's definitely a more polished and focused film than Infinity War. I like the way that this movie handled all of the different plots, and it had a superhero feel to it. Every hero went on their own distinct and really sometimes funny venture, especially the Thor character. and
that was crazy that they did that and they pulled it off.
Interesting time travel elements in there that was a lot of fun. And of course it had a lot of heart. And, we all know where Tony Stark's arc ended up in this movie. There's a lot to love about the characters and where they end up. It's good closure to everything that has happened and has led up to that moment.
Number 4 is a movie that we both love. Okay, and I can't imagine someone who doesn't like this movie because it's super funny. This is a movie.
How dare you not put this as your number 1?
How dare
you? This is the best one, dude.
And you know what? This was such a surprise hit out of flipping nowhere because this is a movie that made Andy Dwyer from Parks and Rec into a superhero. Okay, and then they made an obscure superhero group famous.
The new Han Solo.
The Guardians of the Galaxy.
We all know that he's the new Han Solo.
Yeah. I totally love this movie.
Star-Lord.
This more than any other Marvel movie had me laughing.
They call
from
me
start
Star-Lord.
to finish. Like my gut was hurting. Star-Lord, man. When I think of this movie and when I watched it, I was like, wow. Okay, dang Marvel. What can't you do at this point? Just take my money. I will watch anything you do, pay for anything you do from here on in because you have made me a believer. Okay? This was a laugh out loud movie from, Chris Pratt's portrayal of Star-Lord, man. I didn't realize, Chris Pratt was such a good actor. And, taking the comedic route for Guardians, it was perfect.
I love the humor.
Oh, and the soundtrack too. I bought
the
it.
Soundtrack, man. I thought you weren't gonna go there, man. That's one of the best things about the movie.
And I don't
man.
buy soundtracks.
How infectious that soundtrack is, and how it brought different generations together because the music, of course, is from the 60s, the 70s, and it was refreshing to bring that music back and to integrate it so seamlessly into the plot. And
that's what they do so well is that these songs are so well placed.
Yeah, throughout the movie. And the humor is on point, and Chris Pratt is good, and Bautista is also good.
All of them.
And yeah.
Zoe Saldana.
All of them. I don't think that there's a more fun group than the Guardians in the whole MCU.
Heck, man, even Groot, who all he said was, I am Groot.
I am Groot.
Managed to be funny,
I love that movie. Love that movie.
Okay, all right.
It's much higher up on my list. Very, very high. Quite high.
As I knew it would be. And
very
I
top.
Understand. He's only wearing the T-shirt. Okay, all right. Moving on to your number 3. We're top 3 guys. These have got to be stellar movies. If you haven't watched any of these, stop the video. Go watch them.
So my number 3 is Black Panther.
Okay.
Which we already talked about. You brought it up. One other thing that I'll add is that I loved what it had to say about coming of age and trying to find your place. It had some Lion King vibes to it in that regard, and I love what it had to say about identity and brotherhood. And that's it. I loved Black Panther. It's the only Marvel film to be nominated for Best Picture, by the way. I wanted to put that in there.
Oh, good.
At the Academy Awards. It was a big deal when it came out, and deservedly so.
So my number 3 is a movie I never dreamed would ever be made. You know, it's something that had never been done to this level in Hollywood. I mean, you have all these iconic actors we'd only seen on paper or in cartoons, and, you know, you have a plot that went beyond just action, action, action. And, of course, I'm talking about the original Avengers movie, 2012, one of the biggest hits ever to that point. You know, what I liked about this movie, other than just, you know, stopping the bad guys or just the butt kicking, was that you had a realistic group that had infighting. You had hero vulnerabilities. So this was a layered movie that was kind of based in human characterization, things that you expect would happen when you bring a group together with a bunch of big egos. So I like that.
They all had complexities to them, and they all had a good dynamic arc.
Right. And most important, I thought, was you had a backstory that we had no idea was building toward the Infinity War. This was magnifique.
Magnifique. Well, man, that's the movie that I was referring to earlier that I struggled to keep in my top 10.
Okay.
Ultimately, I felt that since I had 2 Avengers films in my top 10, that I would leave that one out. But it would have easily made my top 10 because it was very good, but it did not.
Okay.
And so...
Respect.
So sorry.
I'll try to respect you for that.
Number 2.
Ooh, number 2.
Yeah, so, okay. I don't care. I don't care. I went with my top 2 favorite MCU movies. They're both comedies. I love them for being comedies. I love them for being irreverent and silly. And this is going to be controversial because I know a lot of people dislike Thor Ragnarok, but I loved Thor Ragnarok. I had so much fun watching this movie in the theater. I thought that when it came to Mark Ruffalo, Tessa Thompson, Hemsworth, and Hiddleston, I thought that the way that the 4 of them interacted in this movie and the way that their stories went was perfect. The kind of gray area that the Loki character goes into this movie, my point is that even though the film takes a highly comedic route, there are still some interesting things happening with the characters. I love the way that Hela is also, of course, the daughter of Odin, and how she, you know, takes on that dark role, and the way that she plays that character is great. I don't know. I love this movie. I enjoyed it. I had so much fun watching it.
So my number 2 is a movie that you've already mentioned on your list. It's a movie that, you know, to me, when I watched it, I reveled in the complexity of it, the different layers, to me, what I thought was believable conflict, even though maybe you thought it was a little petty. But we're talking about Captain America's Civil War. I mean, more than just the action, okay? Again, a Russo brothers movie that delved into what makes us human and how we act from our decisions, and just pulling all of this together. I mean, obviously, you know, a lot of you will look at this and say, oh, you know, you'll think about it and say, I remember this movie for the 18-minute airport scene where the action was so visceral. You know, this was like Avengers 2.5, you know. But I thought that it was, you know, beyond action-packed. It was funny, dark, human, and with a twist that shook me to my core. I mean, I didn't see it coming. Again, a multifaceted movie that seamlessly interweaved all of its moving parts, because there were a lot of different characters and storylines to try to pull together. Right? You had a conflict that was anchored in a fundamental human concept in freedom. And it was a movie.
You wrote like a Gettysburg Address about this movie.
I did, because, you know, I love this movie. and there are things in here that I think some people either it's not a big deal to them, or they kind of don't really realize. So I want to point these things out. It's a movie that put the Avengers' actions, right, under a microscope. Should they be doing what they're doing? Because there are ramifications, and then because of that, you get a villain, Baron Zemo, that was kind of in a way born out of their action. So in other words, a very organic plot going on here. Now, Baron Zemo kind of sucked, but just the fact that he came out of it, I thought was neat. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about is, of course, this was our first look at Tom Holland as the new Spider-Man, and that's pretty much it. I find it hard to believe that anyone would not have this in their top 5.
I just found it boring sometimes. I did.
To each their own, right?
This conflict and the way that they were like, I love you, I hate you. Oh, bro, no. And then the way that their allegiances kind of flip-flopped, like,
well, he was stuck.
Black Widow.
Steve Rogers was in the
helps
middle.
Them, doesn't help them. I don't know, man. It's a little
I'll give you that.
Dramatic.
She kind of flipped the switch a little too fast.
A little melodramatic. Yeah. I don't know. But I respect the choice.
Okay, all right.
Very good.
All right. Now, before we move on to our number 1, I do want to let you guys know that we have an honorable mention list, because I'm sure there are movies that you're wondering, how close were you to putting that in your top 10? So, Beto, why don't you go ahead and give us your 5 honorable mention picks?
Sure will. Okay, so I don't think that these are in any particular order, but I'm just going to say The Avengers, which I had a hard time deciding to cut out, but ultimately didn't make it. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain America, the first Captain America, and Captain Marvel.
Okay.
In my honorable mentions.
Okay. All right. So my list, I will say a little something about each movie. Can't help myself. Okay. So my honorable mentions go like this. What would have been my number, or what kind of is my number 15, is Avengers Age of Ultron. The story didn't really wow me, but it's an action-packed Avengers movie that introduced us to Vision and the Maximoff twins, and it didn't suck. So made my honorable mention. Okay. The next one would be the first Ant-Man, which was, to me, a head-scratcher when I first heard that they were going to make an Ant-Man movie, because I was like, really? Ant-Man?
I like the sequel more.
Like who cares about Ant-Man? But this movie surprised the pants off of me, thanks to their decision to make it comedic, to bring in Paul Rudd as a protagonist, and Michael Pena as the comic relief was brilliant. Like, I loved his storytelling flashbacks. He had one scene where he was like, look at this chick I'm with, man. She's crazy, stupid, fine, right? And the bartender was like, yeah, crazy fine. I mean, that had me rolling even in the second movie. But no, that was good. My next honorable mention would be Spider-Man Far From Home, which I liked more for its visual and special effects than the story, really, to be honest.
I didn't care for that one too much.
Yeah. And after that, I have Guardians 2, Volume 2, which you had mentioned in your list. I liked it because it was a deeper delve into Peter Quill's humanity and his past, and lo and behold, his papa is Wyatt Earp from Tombstone. So I like that. Kurt Russell, always a great actor. So
yes.
That was good. And then lastly, Iron Man 3, which a lot of people criticized, but I actually liked it because I thought you got to see a different side of Tony Stark. You got to see a more vulnerable Tony Stark. So I appreciated it for that. So
wow,
my surprise pick and honorable
mention. I don't
mention.
remember Iron Man 3 all that much.
Some of it's forgettable.
Pretty forgettable.
And so finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, and we sure have made you guys wait a long time for this. It's our number 1 pick, and without further ado, let's go ahead and tell the audience.
Well, by now, I'm sure that the audience does know.
You can figure it out.
Yeah, I have Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians as my number 1 MCU movie. I loved the movie when I saw it, and it's my favorite. It's the one that I revisit the most. It's the one that I keep going back to. Great characters, funny movie, great soundtrack, has a lot of rewatch value. Star-Lord is the new Han Solo. There are some definite little callbacks to Star Wars here and there with the camaraderie between him and
the friction between him and Gamora.
Thank you. The friction between him and Gamora. Yes, and so I loved.
This is that romantic tension, right?
Yes,
yeah, absolutely. They were smart about going back to Star Wars for that.
Yep.
So,
yep.
My number 1 is a movie that obviously had to be in everyone's top 10. I haven't mentioned it yet, but it is clearly, for me, Avengers End Game. Now, you might say, well, duh, that's the easy choice because it's the last movie. But really, this was a very well fleshed out movie. You have to understand all the momentum behind this and all the emotions and connections that were behind this. It was an 11-year buildup, and they had to do it right because a lot of the actors were losing their well, not losing, but their contracts were up. So you've got to do a good job. You're not going to see some of these actors again. And some people grew up with this franchise. So you cannot F this up. And they didn't. This movie made me laugh. It made me cheer and clap in the theater, which I almost never do.
Yes, tone-wise, it was really eclectic. Yeah, it had a lot of good different moods in it, for sure.
Yeah. It even made me shed a tear. Okay, and for a lot of people, made them shed a lot of tears. I mean, we were in the theater, and people around us were weeping, even sobbing. You know, talk about another movie that has made you feel all these different emotions.
A lot of emotions packed up in there. Yeah.
Again, I thought it was a clever send-off for our heroes, you know, and it was a send-off that was perfectly intertwined in the plot. It wasn't contrived. It wasn't forced. It felt good, and it felt organic. I got chills in the dramatic scenes, and some people might say that the climax and the ending were, it's a bunch of fan service, very comic booky, and I didn't care. Because, you know, I'm a Marvel fan, and I grew up reading comic books, so this is my thing.
You wouldn't expect anything less than such a gargantuan finale, right? I mean, it's the end of it all. So.
Exactly. It was like that Thanksgiving meal that you've been starving to eat all day, and then by the time you're finished, you know, you're licking your fingers, your belly's all full, and you're nodding your head like, yeah, that hit the spot.
Very satisfying.
Yep.
Yes.
So there you go. That's our top 10 favorite Marvel movies of all time, guys. Please let us know in the comments down below. Please let us know how you felt about this list. Let us know what you thought we grossly excluded and what you praised us for having in our top 10 list.
And don't forget to look us up on social media. We're on Facebook at Real Screeners and Instagram real.screeners. Don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, join us next time as we continue to come up with innovative ideas to talk about movies.
That's right.
Because, of course, we have slim pickings.
What
nowadays.
do we have else to talk about, right?
Yes. So just tune in next time for some more real takes on movies.
2020 has basically sucked for everyone. Dude, that sounds wrong.
I'm being attacked.
Conflict between him and Fred Rogers, and also bringing in Fred Rogers.
Hello, neighbor.
Oh, shit. That's a great blooper. Steve Rogers, right? It's not Fred, it's Steve Rogers.
You're being mind-controlled, Bucky. Take off your shoes with me and everything.
It's a beautiful day in the MCU, a beautiful day for Marvel.
Fred Rogers.